The situation unfolding in Gaza City has drawn international attention as thousands of Palestinians flee their homes amid a major Israeli ground offensive. To understand what is happening, it is important to break down the different aspects of this development in a way that balances technical detail with clear, accessible explanation. The scene is one of both military complexity and human tragedy, where strategy, design of the operation, and the immediate impacts on civilians all intersect. At its core, a ground offensive represents the most direct and intense form of military engagement. Unlike airstrikes or naval bombardments, which can be carried out at a distance, ground operations involve troops physically moving into contested areas, occupying territory, and engaging directly with opponents. The key feature of this particular operation is the scale. Reports describe it as a major push, which suggests that Israel has mobilized large numbers of soldiers, armored vehicles, and heavy artillery to enter Gaza City and its surroundings. The aim, according to Israeli officials, is to dismantle Hamas's military infrastructure, but the ripple effect is displacement and hardship for civilians who are caught in the crossfire. The performance of a ground offensive depends on several technical factors. One is logistics, how efficiently supplies, such as ammunition, fuel, and food, are transported to advancing units. Another is coordination, because modern offensives typically involve combined forces, infantry, tanks, drones, and air support, all working in sync. In this case, the integration of advanced surveillance systems, precision-guided munitions, and communication networks gives Israeli forces a significant technological edge. However, fighting in dense urban areas like Gaza presents unique challenges. Narrow streets, tunnels, and civilian buildings can all limit the effectiveness of heavy armor and make troops vulnerable to ambushes. That is why urban warfare is often described as one of the most difficult types of combat, and it is also why civilians end up paying the highest price. From the perspective of design elements, Gaza itself becomes a factor. The city is densely populated, with buildings packed tightly together and limited open spaces. This urban design forces combat operations into a confined environment where traditional battlefield maneuvers, such as wide flanking movements, are not possible. Instead, military planners must adapt their strategies to a grid-like environment filled with obstacles. For example, tanks cannot easily maneuver through narrow alleys, and drones may be limited by buildings that block lines of sight. This means that forces are more likely to rely on close-quarters combat, explosives to breach buildings, and intelligence gathered from reconnaissance units to identify threats hidden among civilians. Another crucial element is the human flow that follows the offensive. As Palestinians flee Gaza City, the humanitarian dimension becomes clear. Displacement is not just about movement, it is about survival. Families carry whatever belongings they can, often on foot, as vehicles are scarce and fuel is limited. The performance of humanitarian aid networks comes into play here, as international organizations try to deliver food, water, and medical supplies to people on the move. Yet, with borders closed or tightly controlled, the design of the humanitarian corridor system is often fragmented. Aid groups must negotiate access, establish safe zones, and attempt to coordinate with both military authorities and local communities. This dynamic adds another layer of complexity to the crisis. In terms of unique selling points, or rather the distinctive features that set this offensive apart from others in recent memory, one of the most striking is the level of destruction anticipated in a city that was already under severe strain. Gaza has experienced repeated conflicts over the years, and its infrastructure was fragile even before this latest escalation. The power grid, water systems, and hospitals were already stretched thin. Now, under heavy bombardment and ground fighting, these systems face collapse. Another unique element is the international spotlight. Unlike some past offensives that unfolded more quietly, this one is being covered in real time through social media, satellite images, and global news outlets. The immediacy of information means that public opinion, diplomatic pressure, and even foreign aid responses are evolving in parallel with the events on the ground. The performance aspects of Israel's operation are also measured against the declared objectives. If the stated goal is to neutralize Hamas fighters and destroy their tunnels and weapon caches, the effectiveness of the offensive will be judged on whether those targets are eliminated. However, military analysts often point out that complete eradication of an entrenched group in a dense urban environment is nearly impossible. Fighters can blend into the civilian population, regroup after setbacks, and use the destruction itself as propaganda to gain sympathy. This creates a cycle where tactical success on the battlefield does not necessarily translate into strategic victory. On the Palestinian side, resilience and adaptation play important roles. Despite being outgunned in terms of advanced weaponry, groups operating inside Gaza often rely on guerrilla tactics, using small units, improvised explosive devices, and tunnel networks to offset Israel's technological superiority. The tunnels, in particular, are a design element that has shaped every offensive in Gaza over the past decade. They serve as supply routes, storage spaces, and hidden passages that allow fighters to move undetected. For Israeli forces, neutralizing these tunnels requires a combination of ground operations, specialized engineering units, and intelligence gathering. It is one of the defining technical challenges of the conflict. The civilian experience provides another layer of analysis. For people fleeing Gaza City, the offensive is not measured in terms of tactical gains or territorial control, but in terms of immediate survival. Shelters are overcrowded, food is scarce, and medical facilities are overwhelmed. Families must make split-second decisions about whether to stay or move, often without clear information about where safety can be found. This introduces a human dimension to the design of the conflict, where survival strategies are improvised and constantly adapted to changing conditions. Internationally, the offensive is seen through a different lens. Governments, aid organizations, and media outlets evaluate not only the military performance, but also the humanitarian and political implications. Some countries emphasize Israel's right to defend itself against rocket attacks, while others highlight the disproportionate impact on civilians. The performance of diplomacy, in this sense, becomes just as important as the military campaign. Negotiations for ceasefires, appeals for humanitarian pauses, and debates in forums like the United Nations all become part of the broader landscape. The psychological dimension is also worth noting. For Israeli forces, morale and discipline are key factors in sustaining an operation of this scale. Training and preparation are designed to minimize hesitation in chaotic environments, but urban combat is notorious for its unpredictability. For Palestinians, the psychological strain comes from uncertainty, displacement, and trauma. Children, in particular, are exposed to levels of stress that can have lasting effects. This mental toll is harder to quantify than physical destruction, but it is a crucial aspect of understanding the full scope of the offensive. Another technical factor is the role of technology. Surveillance drones, satellite imagery, and precision-guided weapons are all central to modern ground offensives. These tools allow forces to strike with greater accuracy than in previous decades, but in a crowded urban area, the margin of error is small. Even a precise strike can have catastrophic effects if it hits a building where civilians are sheltering. On the other side, communication technologies like smartphones and encrypted messaging apps allow civilians and fighters alike to share information quickly, sometimes outpacing official announcements. This creates a dynamic information environment where narratives compete for attention and influence. Economically, the offensive has immediate and long-term consequences. Gaza's economy, already devastated by years of blockade and conflict, faces further collapse as businesses are destroyed, infrastructure is damaged, and workers are displaced. The cost of rebuilding will be immense, and international donors will once again face the challenge of funding reconstruction in a place where the cycle of destruction and rebuilding has become tragically familiar. For Israel, the cost comes in the form of mobilization expenses, international scrutiny, and potential instability along its borders. Looking at performance through a humanitarian lens, aid organizations must evaluate their ability to reach those in need. Distribution networks, medical response teams, and emergency shelters all have limits. When those limits are exceeded, the system falters. The design of humanitarian response relies heavily on coordination and trust, both of which are difficult to establish in a war zone. Yet, despite these challenges, stories often emerge of communities supporting one another, sharing food, and opening their homes to displaced families. These acts of solidarity form a unique feature of human resilience that stands in contrast to the violence of the offensive. In terms of broader implications, the offensive in Gaza City is not an isolated event. It is connected to regional dynamics involving neighboring countries, global powers, and long-standing disputes over land, rights, and sovereignty. The performance of this operation, therefore, will influence not only the immediate balance of power between Israel and Hamas, but also future negotiations, alliances, and conflicts. Each military maneuver, each civilian tragedy, and each diplomatic statement adds to a complex picture that extends far beyond the borders of Gaza itself. This is why analyzing the offensive requires both technical detail and human perspective. The key features include the scale of the ground invasion, the use of advanced military technology, the urban design of Gaza that shapes combat tactics, and the massive displacement of civilians. The performance aspects involve logistics, coordination, and effectiveness in achieving objectives, as well as the humanitarian response and diplomatic fallout. The design elements extend from the city's physical layout to the tunnels beneath it, from the structure of military units to the fragile systems of civilian survival. And the unique features include the scale of destruction in an already fragile city, the real-time global coverage and the recurring cycle of conflict and displacement that sets Gaza apart as one of the world's most enduring